I will never forget that night. It was the eve of my 61st birthday, and the house was so quiet I could hear my own heart beating. I fell asleep late, replaying memories of past birthdays in my mind, hugs that were no longer there, and the voice of my husband, Louis, who had passed away 5 years ago. Sometimes I thought I could still hear him, especially when the wind rattled the windows or the grandfather clock in the dining room struck midnight. But that night, it wasn't an echo, it was him. I saw him in my dream with a clarity that froze my soul. He was standing by the bed wearing the same clothes he had on the day he died. His blue work shirt, sleeves rolled up, and that scent of sweet pipe tobacco that always accompanied him. His face was serious, but his gaze was more sad than fearful. He spoke to me in a firm voice, without shouting, like someone giving an order that allowed for no argument. "Beatrice, get out of the house before sunrise." I tried to speak, but my voice wouldn't come out. He leaned in a little, bringing his hand close to my face. I felt the cold of his fingers, and a shiver ran through my body. "Listen to me," he insisted. "Before the sun comes up, get out." I woke up with a start. My heart was hammering in my chest. The room was in semi-darkness. The clock read 3:47 inches the morning. The air smelled of natural gas, or maybe it was just my imagination. I sat up in bed and saw something that took my breath away, a shadow by the door in the exact shape of a man. I blinked, and it vanished. For a moment, I thought I was daydreaming, that loneliness was playing tricks on me. But then I remembered Louis's words, "before sunrise." I put on my coat, grabbed my purse, and left. I didn't turn on the lights. I walked barefoot down the hallway, my soul hanging by a thread. When I opened the front door, the early morning wind cut my skin. The entire neighborhood was asleep. The sky was a dark blanket with no moon, and only the distant barking of a dog broke the silence. I sat on the garden bench, hugging my knees, waiting for dawn. But before we continue, I want to extend a very special invitation to you. Subscribe to the channel and leave a like. This helps me see that you support me and enjoy my stories. And comment down below which city you are watching us from right now. Let's continue. The cold was seeping into my bones. I wanted to go back inside several times, but something stopped me. Not fear, instinct. It was almost 5:30 a.m. when the first ray of light peeked over the rooftops. The sunrise stained the sky a faint orange, and just then, a sound shook me to my core, a dry, loud, tearing explosion. The glass in the windows vibrated. I turned my head and saw my house engulfed in fire. Smoke was pouring out through the cracks in the roof, the air filled with an unbearable smell of gas and burning wood. I ran, screaming my husband's name, even though I knew he wasn't there. The fire roared, devouring the place that had been my life for 30 years. Neighbors came running out, some with garden hoses, others calling 911. I could only watch, paralyzed. While the flames reflected in my tears, a neighbor grabbed my shoulders. "Beatrice, are you alive? My God, you're alive." I couldn't answer. My legs were trembling. The fire crackled as if it had a voice, as if it were saying my name over and over again. And amidst the roar of the flames, I thought I heard a clear, precise, unmistakable phrase. "I told you, Beatrice." I covered my mouth to keep from screaming. The voice came from inside the house, from where our bedroom had been. It was Louis's voice. The fire department arrived minutes later, but the damage was done. The walls collapsed. The furniture burned like memories impossible to save. Everything I had built with my husband was consumed before my eyes. The heat was so intense I had to step back. One of the firefighters approached me. "Ma'am, did you live here alone?" I nodded. "You were lucky to get out in time. If you had been inside." His voice trailed off. He didn't need to finish the sentence. Louis had saved my life. Once again, when the fire died down, the sunrise was complete. The sun's rays illuminated the smoking remains. And for a moment, amidst the ashes, I thought I saw a silhouette standing motionless, looking toward me. It was him, Louis, in the same blue shirt, the same sad look. He smiled slightly and vanished into the smoke. I knelt on the ground, shaking. I didn't cry yet, no. I just felt a deep hollow, as if the last few years of my life had been ripped away all at once. And while the firefighters worked, an idea began to grow in my mind. This hadn't been an accident. The fire had started in the kitchen. but gas doesn't just leave itself on. I had checked everything before sleeping, and I remembered something else. The afternoon before, my son Martin had stopped by the house with his wife, Lauren, just to say hello. They had been in the kitchen. Martin said he wanted to fix a knob on the stove. Lauren, meanwhile, spoke to me with that fake smile that always froze my blood. The fire hadn't taken my house, it had opened my eyes. That morning, while the neighbors whispered and the fire marshal made his report, I looked at the smoke rising to the sky and whispered, "Thank you, Louis, for warning me, for not letting me die amidst lies." What I didn't know yet was that the fire hadn't been the end of anything, but the beginning of a much darker truth, a truth that would change the way I saw my own son forever. The smell of smoke didn't leave my hands for days. I could wash them over and over, but the scent of disaster remained, impregnated in my skin, in my memory, in every corner of my mind. I had lost the house where my children grew up, where I slept next to the love of my life, where every wall told a story. But what hurt the most wasn't the material loss. It was the silent certainty that someone had wanted to see me die. That morning, the fire chief allowed me to get closer to the remains. I wore a handkerchief covering my mouth so as not to inhale the dust, and still, the air burned my throat. The chief, a robust man with a deep voice, explained that the fire had started in the kitchen. A gas leak, Mrs. Miller. Probably the stove valve was left open, he said without looking me in the eye. I nodded, although inside me something screamed, "That's not possible." I was meticulous, excessively so. Since Louis died, I checked the gas 3 times before sleeping. Sometimes I even took a photo to be at peace. That night I did it too. I remembered perfectly turning off the valve, feeling the click under my fingers. Something didn't fit. Among the rubble, I recognized the blackened remains of the dining room. There, among the shadows, shone a piece of glass. It was a picture frame, half melted by the heat. I picked it up carefully. Inside, still visible, was the image. Louis, our son Martin, and his wife Lauren, smiling at a family gathering 3 years ago. Behind them on the table was a white envelope, one I remembered too well. It was the envelope where Louis had kept his original will. I stood observing that photo for long minutes. The fire hadn't consumed it entirely, as if fate had insisted I find it. In that moment, a thought pierced me like a knife. They knew. Martin had been the last one to manipulate the stove. Lauren, meanwhile, was going through my drawers with the excuse of helping me clean. The night of the fire, neither of them called to see how I was. I had to be the one to contact them the next day. When they finally arrived at the scene, they did so with a coldness that froze my soul. Martin hugged me briefly, without tears, without emotion. Lauren, on the other hand, feigned horror with the theatricality of a cheap actress. "Oh, Mom, what a tragedy," she said, bringing a hand to her chest. "Thank goodness you got out in time." I just looked at her. In her eyes, there was no fear, but relief. During lunch at my neighbor Teresa's house, who had offered me temporary shelter, Martin tried to convince me of something. "Mom, you have to come with us." "Can't you stay here alone?" I asked, without raising my voice. "Yes, of course. Lauren and I will take care of you until everything is settled." Until everything is settled. That phrase made me smile bitterly. I knew perfectly well that what he wanted was to keep me close to control what remained. It wasn't the first time he had tried to get his hands on my affairs since his father died. Years ago, Louis had left clear instructions. The house and the land would remain in my name until the day of my death, at which moment they would be divided among the children. But a few months ago, Martin had insisted on helping me with the paperwork. He said he wanted to make things easier for me, to keep everything organized. Now I understood what that meant. I agreed to go with them, although inside I was seething not with hate, but with dangerous curiosity. I needed to know what else they were hiding. The first day at their house, everything seemed normal, too normal. Lauren smiled at every turn, made me coffee, showed me the guest room where I would sleep. "We made some arrangements, Mom, so you feel at home." "Thank you," I replied, suppressing the tremor in my voice. At night, however, something kept me awake. I heard whispers in the hallway, footsteps stopping in front of my door. Sometimes I thought I heard the sound of a key turning slowly, as if someone were testing if it was locked. One early morning, I opened my eyes and saw a shadow pass under the threshold. Lauren, I recognized her by her perfume. I pretended to sleep. I heard her open my purse and rummage through my things. When she left, I got up slowly. The drawer of my bedside table was ajar. The set of keys to the property was missing. That morning, while we were having breakfast, I asked Lauren, "Have you seen my keys?" "Your keys?" "No. No idea. Curious. I had them last night in my purse." "Maybe you lost them in the fire, Mom, with all the smoke and confusion." She smiled. That smile was the confirmation I needed. I didn't say anything else. I had to move carefully. I knew that if I showed my suspicions too soon, they would isolate me, and this time I wouldn't have Louis to warn me. That day, while Martin was at work, I decided to check his study. It was a small room full of folders and documents. Among them, I found an envelope with the letterhead of the Northern Trust Bank. Inside was a loan contract in his name, and at the bottom, my forged signature. The loan had been taken out 3 weeks before the fire. The amount was exactly equal to the estimated value of my house. I felt a vertigo so strong I had to sit down. My hands were shaking. Martin hadn't just tried to rob me. He had mortgaged my house as if I no longer existed. I put the document in my purse. That night, when he returned, I pretended everything was fine. He asked me to tell him again how the fire had happened with a strange insistence. "Are you sure you didn't leave the gas on, Mom?" he said, looking down. "Positive, son," I replied. "You know how careful I am." "Yeah, sure," he murmured. Inside, I was boiling with pain. I couldn't understand at what moment my son had become a stranger. I remembered when, as a boy, he brought me flowers from the garden, when he cried if I got sick. Where had that boy gone? At what moment did I lose him? That night, I prayed for the first time in months. I didn't ask for revenge. I asked for clarity. And just before sleeping, I felt it again. The same smell of pipe tobacco. The same deep murmur of Louis next to my ear. "They haven't finished with you yet." I woke up sweating, and in that instant, I knew. The fire had only been the first attempt. When I agreed to stay at my son's house, I did it for one reason only. I needed to watch them act up close. It wasn't love or fear, it was strategy. By that point, the pain had stopped hurting and had turned into lucidity. A woman who has survived fire learns to read the embers before they ignite. Lauren seemed delighted to have me there. The first day she made me breakfast, accompanied me to the pharmacy, and even bought me a new blanket so I'd sleep warmly. "Mom," she told me with that smile that didn't reach her eyes. Her kindness was a perfect mask, and behind it hid something she could no longer hide: impatience. Martin, on the other hand, avoided staying home too long. He greeted me with mechanical affection, like someone fulfilling a duty. Sometimes I saw him leave at dawn with his cell phone in his hand and come back smelling of alcohol and someone else's perfume. I pretended to sleep, but my ears, accustomed to long silences, heard everything. One afternoon, while Lauren was cooking, the doorbell rang. She dried her hands quickly and peeked out the window before opening. "Who is it?" I asked. "Martin's accountant," she replied nervously. "He's coming to drop off some work papers." The man entered without looking at me. He carried a leather briefcase and a hurried expression. He left an envelope on the table, exchanged a few words with Lauren, and left. But what caught my attention was that she ran to hide the envelope in her purse. That same night, when everyone was asleep, I got up in silence. The purse was on a chair by the door. I opened it carefully. Inside, besides makeup and keys, I found the accountant's envelope, and inside it, a copy of Louis's forged will. I couldn't contain the trembling in my hands. The document had my name, but the signature wasn't mine. The handwriting was clumsy, insecure, almost childish. It stated that the house and land passed directly to Martin upon my accidental or natural death. Accidental. That word stuck to my skin like a burn. I put the envelope back where I found it, and that night, I didn't sleep. The next morning, Lauren entered my room without knocking. "Mom, did you sleep well?" she asked with her cloying tone. "Yes, dear, like an angel." "Oh, I'm glad, because last night I heard noises in the hallway. I thought you had gotten up." "Must have been the wind," I lied. Her eyes scanned me like a cat watching its prey. "You should take care, Mom. A fall at your age can be fatal." She smiled, turning around, and for an instant, I swear I saw the shadow of evil in her expression. Martin, meanwhile, seemed increasingly distant. When I tried to talk to him about his father, he changed the subject. When I asked him about his work, he answered with evasions. One night, coming back late, I heard him arguing with Lauren in the kitchen. "I told you it wasn't the time," he muttered. "And when will it be, Martin?" she replied. "We can't keep waiting. Lower your voice, for God's sake. She might hear you." So what? If she can barely climb the stairs, she won't last long. My soul shrank. It was my own children planning my end. And yet, instead of fear, I felt a strange calm, one that only someone who has nothing left to lose feels. The next day, I faked a fainting spell. I fell in the hallway while Lauren was on the phone. Her reaction was instantaneous. She ran toward me, but not to help me. "Martin!" she screamed. "Come quick!" He came running down. He grabbed my shoulders, pale. "Mom, Mom, can you hear me?" I opened my eyes slowly. "Just a dizzy spell, son. Don't worry. The family doctor came to check me. Nothing serious," he said. "Stress, probably, but the effect was exactly what I was looking for." Lauren and Martin let their guard down. They began to speak with less care, believing I was weak. And that was how I learned what they were really plotting. One night, I heard the phrase that froze my blood. Lauren, in a low voice, said, "If we do it with gas again, no one will suspect." Martin replied, No, we can't repeat that. This time it has to look like a fall." I covered my mouth not to scream. They had tried to kill me once, and they planned to do it again. The next morning, I acted with my usual naturalness. I smiled, cooked, and even thanked them for taking care of me. Lauren hugged me with feigned tenderness. "So lucky to have you here, Mom." "Yes," I replied with serenity. "And how lucky I am to be alive." She laughed without understanding. But that same afternoon, I received an unexpected visit. It was Richard Evans, the estate attorney who had worked with my husband on drafting his will. "Mrs. Miller," he said in a low voice, looking around, "I need to speak with you in private." Lauren approached immediately. "Is something wrong?" she asked. "Just a matter of old paperwork," I replied. "Don't worry. We'll go to the garden." Richard pulled an envelope from his briefcase. "This is your husband's original will. How did you get it?" "I thought it was lost in the fire. I had it stored at the firm. Your son came 2 months ago with another document, but something smelled wrong to me." I looked him in the eyes. "What did that other document say?" "That you had renounced all your assets of your own free will." I had to close my eyes not to cry. Louis had warned me from the other side, and now I understood why. They didn't just want my money. They wanted to erase my name. That night, I kept the original will under my mattress. I slept little, but not with fear. For the first time in weeks, I slept with a purpose. I knew the battle was just beginning, and this time I didn't plan to run. Before closing my eyes, I smelled Louis's tobacco again. "Calm down, Beatrice," I heard his clear voice, close by. "You are no longer alone." I smiled in the dark because I knew it. The fire that once almost killed me now burned inside me, and it wouldn't go out until the truth came to light. There is no silence heavier than that of a house where everyone lies. During the day, voices fill the hallways, laughs sound forced, silverware clinks on the table. But at night, when the lights go out and the air becomes dense, the truth walks barefoot. I no longer slept deeply. My body rested, but my ears remained attentive. I knew how to distinguish every noise, the creaking of the floorboards, the sigh of the curtains moving, the hum of the refrigerator. And among all those sounds, one began to repeat every early morning the sound of footsteps by my door. They were slow, careful, as if someone were avoiding making noise. Sometimes they stopped in front of my room for minutes, and I could hear the visitor's held breath. I knew who it was. Lauren. I didn't confront her. On the contrary, every night I pretended to sleep, leaving my purse within reach of her curiosity. I knew she couldn't resist the temptation to check my things. A guilty mind always needs to check if it has left any loose ends. During breakfast, her performance was impeccable. "Mom, I made you oatmeal with cinnamon like you like." "Thank you, dear," I replied with a kind voice while watching her move. Every gesture of hers was a theater play. Sometimes I wondered if even her affection for Martin was part of the script. He, for his part, was increasingly absent. He slept poorly, drank more, argued with Lauren in secret, and when he tried to talk to me, his voice broke mid-sentence, as if a part of him still felt shame. One night, While we were having dinner, Lauren mentioned something that made me look down to hide the trembling in my hands. "Martin, honey, did you speak to the insurance lawyer yet?" she said, pouring him wine. "Not now, Lauren," he replied, irritated. "Are you sure? Because that money can't wait." He glared at her, letting her know I shouldn't find out. I passed the days in silence, observing every word, every gesture, every lie, until one afternoon, while they went out to run some errands, I entered their bedroom. The door was ajar. On the dresser, a picture frame with our family photo: Louis, Martin, my younger daughter Claire, and me, smiling. But behind the frame, carefully hidden, was a blue folder. I opened it. Inside were copies of notarized documents, payment receipts, and among them, a falsified medical report. Beatrice Miller. Advanced heart failure. The date was recent. My name, my age, my address. But I had never had that exam. I froze. That was part of the plan, to make people believe my death would be natural. I put the document away, closed the folder, and returned it to its place. I couldn't act yet. I still lacked evidence and strength. That night, turning off the lamp, I felt a familiar smell: tobacco, the same aroma Louis always left when he sat next to me on sleepless nights. "Don't cry, Bea," his voice whispered, so real it gave me goosebumps. "Fear no longer belongs to you." I closed my eyes, letting the tears run silently. I knew that somehow he was still accompanying me. The next morning, I decided to go out for a walk. I hadn't breathed fresh air in weeks. While walking through the neighborhood park, I met Teresa, my lifelong neighbor. Upon seeing me, she hugged me tight. "Beatrice, you don't know how I prayed for you. That fire was the work of the devil." "Yes," I replied, looking at the ground. "Of a devil with a last name." She looked at me with surprise. I asked her not to ask questions, but to help me with something. I handed her the envelope with the original will to keep in her house without telling anyone. "Please, Teresa," I begged. "If something happens to me, take it directly to Richard, the attorney." Her eyes watered. "Are they threatening you?" "Not yet," I said. "But they will." When I returned to the house, Lauren was waiting for me in the living room. "Where were you, Mom?" "Walking a bit." "I needed air. You should have let us know." "We were worried." "Really?" I asked, smiling. I didn't think anyone here worried about me. Her smile vanished. In her eyes I saw a flash of irritation, barely a second, but enough to confirm she knew something was changing. That night, I feigned chest pain. I moaned just enough to wake Martin. "Mom, what's wrong?" he asked, alarmed. "Nothing, son. Just a little pressure." Lauren ran to get a glass of water while I observed her face. There was no fear in her, but contained anxiety. "We should take her to the hospital," Martin said. "No need," I replied with serenity. "I'm fine." And then, seeing them argue, I understood that their alliance was beginning to crack. The weight of guilt was separating them, and I was going to take advantage of it. The next day, I showed up at Richard's law office without warning. I carried the falsified document I had found. When he compared it with the original, he shook his head. "This is a felony, Beatrice. Do you want to proceed legally?" "Not yet," I replied. "Not yet." "Why wait?" "Because I want to see how far they are capable of going." Richard looked at me with respect, and perhaps also with fear. He knew that behind my calm voice, something bigger was brewing. That night, Lauren prowled my door again, but this time when she turned the knob, I was already awake. I waited for her to enter. She approached my purse and opened it clumsily. Then I turned on the lamp. "Looking for something, Lauren?" She jumped, her face pale. "Oh, Mom, you scared me. I came to see if you needed anything." "At 2 inches the morning?" How attentive. We looked at each other in silence. The air was thick, almost unbreathable. I didn't blink. Neither did she. During that eternal minute, she understood that I already knew everything. "You should sleep, Lauren," I told her finally, in a low voice. "Tomorrow will be a long day." "Why do you say that?" "Just a feeling." She turned around and left without saying more. I locked the door, leaned my back against it, and breathed deeply. The fear had disappeared. In its place, a strange calm was born, a calm that only precedes the storm. And while the dawn painted the sky gray, I promised myself that soon everything would end. I would no longer be the woman fleeing the fire. I would be the one lighting it. They say silence is the language of the wise. I learned that it is also the weapon of survivors. After living surrounded by lies for so long, I understood that sometimes the best way to attack is to pretend you are already defeated. I began my performance on a random morning. During breakfast, I let the coffee cup fall. The hot liquid burned my hand, but I made no gesture of pain. Lauren ran toward me, feigning concern. "Mom, what's wrong?" "I don't know, dear. Lately, everything falls from my hands." Martin looked at me with a furrowed brow, worried but not so much for my health as for the possibility that his plan might get complicated. I lowered my head, took a deep breath, and coughed dramatically. It was the start of my little theater. During the following days, I started faking symptoms: dizziness, weakness, lack of appetite. Lauren accompanied me at every step, smiling, helpful, and increasingly confident. She gave me my medications, white pills that I kept under my tongue and then flushed down the toilet. I didn't know what they were, but I didn't need to check to understand they weren't vitamins. Martin began to be absent more frequently. He told me he had work, but I saw him arrive at dawn with a tense face. Guilt was devouring him, and I only had to wait. That wait was my best ally. While they believed my mind was clouding, I was gathering evidence. I recorded their conversations with a small device hidden in my robe. I kept copies of the falsified documents, and when I had everything, I wrote a letter by hand addressed to Richard, the attorney. If something happened to me, he would know exactly what to do. But before continuing, tell me here in the comments what you think of this story so far and what you would do in my place. Don't leave the video, because what comes next will give you goosebumps. One afternoon, while Lauren was talking on the phone in the garden, I listened to her from the window. "Yes, everything is going well. She won't last long. The doctor says her heart is weak." Pause. No, she suspects nothing. Believe me, when they least expect it, we will be free." Free. That word churned my soul. Free from whom? From me. From the woman who gave them a roof, food, love, and his father's legacy. I couldn't comprehend at what moment love had transformed into greed. That night, I decided the time had come. I prepared the house carefully. On the dining room table, I placed Louis's portrait with a lit candle in front of it. I put on soft music, the same we listened to on our anniversaries. Lauren was surprised. "What's going on, Mom?" "Nothing, dear. I just want to thank you both for taking care of me." Martin sat in front of me, nervous. Lauren smiled. "Thank us? No need, Mom." I poured wine into 3 glasses. I took a slow sip. "I want to propose a toast," I said. "To family." Martin raised his glass with a trembling hand. Lauren imitated me. We drank. For a few minutes, silence reigned, until I took a small remote control from my pocket. Martin looked at me, confused. "What is that, Mom?" "A souvenir." I pressed the button, and the television turned on. A recording appeared on the screen. The voices were unmistakable. If we do it with gas again, no one will suspect." "No, better, it looks like a fall." The color disappeared from my son's face. Lauren stood up abruptly. "What is this? That is a lie." "A lie?" I asked with a calm even I didn't recognize. "Listen to the end." The recording continued. "Sooner or later the old lady will fall, and everything will be ours." Lauren screamed that I was crazy, that it was all a montage. Martin, speechless, buried his face in his hands. "Mom, I wasn't like this. I didn't think." "But you said it," I replied without raising my voice. "And that is enough." That night I slept deeply for the first time in months. At dawn I heard Louis whisper my name in the wind. "You did it, Beatrice, you did it." When I woke up, Martin had disappeared. Lauren, with red eyes, looked at me with silent hate. "You don't know what you've just caused, old woman." "Yes, I do," I replied. "Justice." I called Richard, told him everything, and at noon the police knocked on the door. Lauren was arrested for attempted murder, forgery, and fraud. Martin turned himself in 2 days later, unable to bear the weight of the guilt. When the house was empty, I walked to Louis's portrait. "Forgive me for taking so long, love," I whispered, but I needed to do it my way. The fire almost killed me, but silence that would have buried me alive. Sometimes you don't need to shout to get justice. It is enough to keep silence, just long enough, until the guilty speak for themselves. And so they did. The day dawned with a clear sky, without a single cloud. It was strange, because for weeks the weather had been gray, as if the entire city reflected my grief. But that morning the sun entered through the window and settled directly on Louis's portrait on the dining room table. I stood looking at it for a long while. His smile seemed more alive than ever, and for the first time in a long time, I felt he was back. Not physically, of course, but his presence filled every corner of the house. The aroma of tobacco, the slight creaking of the wood, the sensation of silent company. It was as if he accompanied me in every step of my plan, giving me the strength I lacked. That afternoon, I set the table for a dinner. It wasn't just any dinner, it was the last one I would share with Martin and Lauren before the end. I lit the candles, placed the antique porcelain plates, the ones Louis and I used only on special occasions, and adorned the center with white flowers, my husband's favorites. Lauren arrived first with her strong perfume and her fake smile. "What's happening now, Mom? Some celebration?" "A family dinner," I replied calmly. "It's been a while since the three of us ate together." "What a detail," she said, though her eyes shone with distrust. Martin arrived minutes later, thinner, with a tired face. He hugged me weakly. "Mom, I don't know if this is a good idea." "Yes, it is," I assured him. "Today we need to talk, all of us." While I served the food, I felt a peace that felt strange to me. It was the type of serenity that only arrives when one no longer has fear. Louis had taught me that. Dignity is not negotiated, not even with children. "Looks like an anniversary dinner," Lauren said, laughing mockingly. "In a way, it is," I replied. "Today marks 1 year since Louis died." Silence fell over the table like a stone. Martin put down his silverware. "Mom, I didn't know." "Of course not," I said. "You never remember the important dates." We ate in silence for a few minutes. The tension was so dense it could be cut with a knife. Lauren played with her wine glass. Martin watched her uneasily, not knowing what to expect. Then I spoke. "I've thought a lot about the fire." The two of them tensed up. "It was an accident, Mom," Martin said quickly. "Yes, that's what everyone said." "But there is something that doesn't fit," I continued. "I checked the gas that night. I turned it off with my own hands." Lauren laughed nervously. "And what are you insinuating, Mom? That someone wanted to kill you?" I looked her in the eyes. "I'm not insinuating, Lauren. I know." The silence that followed was interminable. Martin watched me with a face coming undone. Lauren tried to dissimulate, but her look betrayed her. "You have no proof," she said, gritting her teeth. "On the contrary," I replied, "I have it all." And I pulled the folder from the drawer. Inside were the recordings, the copies of the falsified loan, the photos, and Louis's original will. Martin went pale. Lauren froze with the glass halfway to her mouth. "It can't be," he whispered. "It is. And everything is in the hands of the lawyer and the police," I said with a calm voice. "But I didn't call them to take revenge." "Then why?" Martin asked desperately. "Because I want you to look me in the eye while I tell you what you did." I got up slowly and took Louis's portrait. "Do you remember this man?" I asked. "The one who gave you everything." Martin lowered his head. Lauren remained mute, hands shaking. "He trusted you," I continued. "And you, instead of honoring his memory, tried to destroy the little that was left of me." Martin began to cry. Lauren tried to get up, but her legs were shaking. "I don't understand," she murmured. "How did you find out?" "He told me," I replied. Both looked at me confused. "Who?" asked Martin. "Louis." "Dad is dead," Lauren screamed, out of her mind. "Oh, yes? Then explain to me how I knew I had to leave the house that night." The wind blew hard, and one of the candles went out. The air turned freezing. Lauren covered her arms. Martin looked around, scared. "Mom, what are you doing?" "Nothing, son. Just closing a circle." At that moment, the dining room door opened by itself. A blast of cold air crossed the room, making the candle flames flicker. No one spoke. Lauren brought a hand to her chest. Martin stood up. "Must be the wind," he stammered. I smiled. "Yes, the wind." Or Louis. I looked at the portrait, and for a second I swear I saw his smile move, barely perceptible. The shadow of his silhouette seemed to reflect on the wall. "Dad," whispered Martin with a broken voice. "Yes, son," I said. "Listen well, because the wind, that wind that seemed to roar from the past, brought a sound that wasn't a simple draft of air. It was a sigh, a name, Martin." Lauren broke down crying. Martin fell to his knees. I remained standing, firm, serene. "I don't want to see you in prison," I said, "but I do want you to live knowing what you did." Martin raised his eyes with tears. "Mom, Don't speak. There are no words that clean an intention." The clock struck 9 p.m. I blew out the candles one by one. "This dinner is over." "And now what are you going to do?" asked Lauren, trembling. "Nothing. The rest will take care of itself." The next day, the police arrived for them, not because I reported them, but because Richard had already handed everything over. My task had concluded. That night I sat alone in the dining room. The wind kept coming through the cracks. The smell of tobacco floated in the air, and suddenly I felt it again, that warm presence behind me. "Thank you, Louis," I whispered, "for warning me and for coming back." The frame of the portrait fell to the floor without anyone touching it, but the glass didn't break. I took it in my hands and saw that Louis's smile seemed clearer than ever. I closed my eyes and felt a soft breeze run across my face, and then I knew I wasn't alone. I never was. Silence has its own sound. I hadn't noticed it until then. It is a slow echo that slips between empty spaces, a murmur that caresses what is no longer there. After everything that had happened, after the truth, the tears, the screams, and the judgments, only that remained. Silence. A different silence. Without fear, without lies, a clean silence. The house where I now lived was small, with light walls and windows facing the garden. Sometimes it was hard to get used to so much free space, to not hearing furtive steps or voices whispering behind my back. But little by little, I began to love that calm. Every sunrise was a promise. I could breathe without feeling like someone was waiting for my last breath. Even so, there was something pending, an inner voice asking me to close the circle, not with words, but with a gesture. That is why, one morning, after much thought, I decided to return to the place where it all began, my old house. Or rather, its ruins. Upon arriving, the air smelled of old smoke and wet earth. The rain of the last few days had washed away part of the soot, but the black traces of fire were still visible on the crumbled walls. The gate was rusted. When I pushed it, it squeaked with a long lament, as if the house itself recognized my presence. I took a few slow steps, looking around. The garden that used to be full of roses was now rough terrain covered in weeds. The windows didn't exist. The blackened floor was full of glass fragments, broken ceramic, and pieces of my life. Every little piece told a story. I stopped in front of where the kitchen used to be. I remembered Louis sitting at the table reading the newspaper while I made coffee. "B, do you know what I like most about coffee?" he used to tell me. "What?" I would answer. "That it smells like home." I smiled, although tears burned in my eyes. There was no coffee this time, only the sour smell of the past. I advanced toward the hallway. The walls, or what remained of them, were covered in ash. The frame of a door still stood, like a lonely arch, resisting oblivion. The wind blew softly, lifting the dust in small swirls. And it was then that something caught my attention, a glint among the debris. I crouched down with effort. My body ached, but my soul pushed me. I moved the pieces of wood one by one until my fingers touched something cold, metallic. It was a ring. My heart stopped for an instant. I lifted it carefully, and upon seeing it, a sob escaped me uncontrollably. It was Louis's wedding ring, the same one he wore on our wedding day, with the tiny inscription inside, B and L. I stood looking at it, unable to contain the tears. It had survived the fire, time, oblivion. It was as if Louis were telling me that despite everything, love can also resist flames. While I held it between my fingers, I remembered the day he put it on me for the first time. It was a warm December afternoon. We were young, naive, happy. Louis was shaking more than I was. "I don't know if I deserve so much," he told me, "but I promise to learn to." I laughed and replied, "Love isn't deserved, Louis. It's cared for." Years later, in the midst of everything we lived through, that phrase returned to my mind over and over again. And now, standing among the ruins, I understood that we had fulfilled it. We had cared for each other even after death. I kept walking among the remains, searching without knowing exactly what. Something inside me told me there was still a hidden truth, and I found it. Under a fallen beam, almost buried, was a small metal box. I pulled it out with trembling hands. It was blackened, dented, but locked. I pried it open. Inside were several envelopes and a letter. The top envelope had my name, Beatrice. I recognized the handwriting immediately, Louise. The same that had filled so many messages and little notes stuck to the mirror. The same that wrote to me when we argued, "Waiting for you on the terrace. I won't sleep without your forgiveness." The paper was yellowed, but the words were still there, intact. Beatrice, if you are reading this, it is because life took you further than we imagined. Do not be afraid. Fear does not belong to you. Courage does. If fire ever touches your life, remember that fire purifies. It does not destroy. Do not let anyone steal your faith, not even those you love, because true love doesn't hurt. It teaches. I will be with you where the wind stops and silence embraces you. Your strength will be my peace. My tears fell on the sheet, blurred but sincere. I spoke to him in a low voice with an open soul. Oh, Louis, even in your death you keep guiding me. Under that letter was a smaller one, wrapped with a red ribbon. Inside, an old key and a short note, almost a written whisper. For when it all ends, you deserve to start over. I didn't understand. I put it in my coat pocket along with the ring. I knew at some point I would discover its purpose. That afternoon, Richard the attorney called me. His voice sounded different, as if he also kept a secret. Beatrice, there is something I didn't tell you before. What is it? Louis left an account in your name. An account? Yes. In it, there are funds and documents he asked me to safeguard. He said I should hand them to you only if you reached this point alive. And how did he know that? I don't know, Mrs. Miller, but he asked me for an exact phrase. Tell her that the fire was not an end, but a beginning. I felt my heart shrink. The key. That key was for that box. Louis had thought of everything, even the possibility that I would have to be reborn from the ashes. That night I returned to the ruins for the last time. I carried the ring, the key, and the letters with me. The sky was clear, and the moon illuminated the terrain like a silver lamp. I sat on the fallen wall of what was once our bedroom. The air was cold, but it didn't hurt. It smelled of earth, ash, and tobacco. That unmistakable aroma. "Is that you, Louis?" I whispered. There was no answer. But the wind moved suddenly, soft, enveloping, like a caress on my hair. I closed my eyes and felt him so close that my soul trembled. "You are free now, Beatrice." The voice didn't sound outside. It sounded inside. Inside my chest, inside my memory, inside everything I once was. I opened my eyes. The sky was dawning, the horizon burned in pink tones, and for an instant, the fire of the past transformed into pure light. Then I understood. Louis never asked me to flee the fire. He asked me to seek the sunrise. I stayed there until the sun was high. Every ray was a blessing, a new breath for the soul. When I finally stood up, I looked back one last time. The ruins no longer seemed like a tomb. They were a testimony. What burns doesn't always disappear. Sometimes it is reborn differently. I walked back slowly along the dirt path. The birds sang, and the air smelled of promise. In my pocket, the key seemed to vibrate as if it had its own pulse. I knew I still had one step left to take. Open that new door. That afternoon I went to the bank, handed over the key, the number Richard had given me, and waited. The manager returned with a small safety deposit box. Inside was a folder, a deed, and a final note. "Beatrice, this land facing the sea belongs to you. It is our refuge. Go there when the noise of life tires you. There begins your freedom." I couldn't contain the crying. Louis had planned it all, not as an escape, but as a second chance. That night, back home, I lit a candle next to Louis's portrait. The fire danced, reflecting his smile in the glass. I spoke to him softly. "Thank you for not letting me die, for teaching me that even fire can have a soul." I blew out the candle with a sigh. Darkness no longer scared me, because inside me the light remained on, and while the wind entered through the window bringing the smell of tobacco and sea salt, I felt that Louis walked beside me, silent, satisfied. The fire separated us, my love, but the truth brought us back together. Sometimes life takes everything from you, so you learn to look at what is essential. I understood it when I saw myself in front of the sea, with empty hands and my soul finally at peace. Months had passed since that night when the truth came to light. Months in which I learned to breathe without fear, to sleep without locking doors, to speak without trembling. I lived in the small house Louis had left for me, on that land facing the ocean I never knew existed. A small white cottage, simple, with large windows and the smell of new wood. From my room, I could hear the waves crashing against the rocks and the song of the seagulls at dawn. The sea became my companion, and the wind the messenger of everything that isn't said but is felt. Every day began the same. I woke up early, lit a candle in front of Louis's portrait, and opened the windows to let the breeze in. I was no longer scared by the smell of smoke or the sound of doors moving with the air. Now I knew they weren't signs of death, but reminders of life. It was him greeting me in his own way. At first, loneliness hurt. I was used to serving, caring, living for others, and suddenly I had to learn to live for myself. It was hard to accept that my house was empty, that there were no longer other people's footsteps or voices feigning affection. But over time I understood that silence wasn't a punishment, it was a gift. I started writing in a new notebook with blue covers, not to remember the past, but to give thanks. I noted small things: the smell of hot bread, the sound of the sea at dawn, the calm of not having to lie, and a phrase I repeated every morning: I survived the fire and learned to love the embers. One day, while watering the flowers, a young man from the town approached. It was Daniel, the son of a fisherman who lived nearby. "Are you Mrs. Miller?" he asked shyly. "Yes," I replied. "My father told me about your story. He said you defeated the fire." I smiled. "I didn't defeat it, Daniel. I just learned not to fear it." Since then, the boy began to visit me often. He helped me with groceries, fixed things around the house, and stayed to chat in the afternoons. He was noble, curious, full of life. Sometimes he reminded me of Martin when he was little, before greed stole his innocence. One afternoon I told him part of my story, not all, because there are wounds that shouldn't be opened twice. He listened in silence, and at the end, he said something that marked me. "My father always says that people who survive fire don't burn ever again. They just shine differently." I looked him in the eyes and knew he was right. Little by little I began to redecorate my new life. I hung the curtains I had saved from the fire. I restored an old chair I found at the market and planted white roses in the garden. I called them the Daughters of Fire. Every time they bloomed, the air filled with perfume, as if life wanted to remind me that beauty is also born from ash. I started receiving visits from women in the town. Many of them, widows or older like me, came to drink tea, to chat, to laugh. At first, they called me the Lady of the Fire. Over time, they called me Miss B. And without intending to, I became a refuge for those who, like me, had lost something but still had the will to live. One night in December, exactly on the eve of my birthday, I sat facing the sea. It was the same date Louis had appeared to me in dreams that fateful year. The sky was clear, and the stars seemed closer than ever. I lit a candle next to me and closed my eyes. "Thank you, love," I whispered, "for not letting me fall, for continuing to guide me." The wind blew softly, and the flame of the candle leaned without going out. The smell of tobacco appeared clear, enveloping, like a caress I already knew. I smiled. I didn't need to see him to know he was there. "I promise you I will keep living, Louis," I said, looking at the sky. Not out of obligation, but out of love. At dawn, the sea was calm. The sun emerged from the horizon with a golden shine that seemed to set the water on fire without burning it. I stayed watching that image, understanding that was the true fire Louis spoke of, the one that doesn't destroy, but transforms, the one that purifies the soul. I stood up, took a deep breath, and felt a lightness I hadn't felt in years. It was as if finally life was returning what fear had taken from me. I went back to the house, and passing in front of the mirror, I noticed something that surprised me. My reflection was no longer that of a broken woman. It was that of someone who had survived, who had learned, who had forgiven. And in my eyes, I saw him, Louis, smiling from somewhere on the other side of time. That afternoon I wrote the last page of my blue notebook. I didn't want it to be a sad ending, but a luminous farewell. I wrote, The fire wanted to destroy me, but it didn't know that I too was fire. Lewis saved me once, but then I had to save myself. And now, when the sun is born and the sea shines, I know we keep walking together, him in the sky and I on the earth. I closed the notebook, blew out the candle, and sat by the window. The wind brought with it the aroma of roses, and for an instant, I seemed to hear a distant, serene, warm voice. I told you, Beatrice. The sunrise always comes after the fire. If this story touched your heart, leave me a comment telling me what city you are watching us from and what lesson Beatrice's life left you with. Like and subscribe to the channel to keep sharing stories that remind us that love, faith, and strength never go out. Because even when the world burns, there is always a sunrise waiting for us.